Good morning. My name is Markayla Vallien, and I will be presenting on automatic classification of bloodstain patterns caused by gunshot and blunt impact at various distances. So first, why blood spatter analysis? Blood spatter analysis is important because if used correctly, it can be used in the criminal justice field, as in it can be used in court. It's important to do procedures right though, because if not following the proper procedures and policies in place within whatever organization you're working with, crime scene reconstruction cannot be used. If chain of custody is not met, if the policies or SOPs are not met during the time that you're reconstructing the crime scene and trying to present this in court, it cannot be effective. But if used correctly, it will be effective in court. This field is interesting because learning what type of object, handgun or a bat or anything like that, is really interesting to me of like what kind of spatters or bloodstain spatters can be caused by a bat or a gun. So also I chose to research blood spatter analysis because I find it really interesting. I think being able to reconstruct the crime scene simply based off of blood spatter is extremely interesting. I also think that blood spatter analysis doesn't get the recognition it deserves. I don't hear much about it, even in like classes. I don't hear much about it. So I wanted to explore something that doesn't really get talked about, and I found it. It may sound creepy, but I like blood. Like I like being able to understand this type of blood spatter was caused by a bullet wound, or this type of blood spatter was caused by a knife or a bat or a pot, anything like that. I found it really important and interesting. So, bloodstain and bloodstain pattern analysis. Their definitions. A bloodstain pattern is a ensemble of bloodstains. A blood spatter pattern is produced by drops of blood from a source which have traveled through the air before reaching a target surface, such as a wall, or as used in this study, it would be a card stock. So, it's really important to know that we'll be using a cardstock instead of a wall. This experiment was strictly for research purposes. Um, so, bloodstain. Stains are marks that can be observed on a solid surface called a target, right? So, say for instance, if we had a wall, that would be your target surface. But in this case, our target surface would be a cardstock. So, bloodstain pattern analysis, also known as BPA. BPA interprets the bloodstain patterns at a crime scene in order to provide evidence to reconstruct a crime scene. So BPA is the basis of this experiment because it can help determine whether an impact came from blunt force or a gunshot. The analysis of a bloodstain pattern can help criminal investigators determine the type of weapons or different type of various weapons used at a crime scene. So it's extremely important for crime scene documentation. So, the purpose of the experiment was to create a framework on how to classify blood stain patterns generated under controlled conditions into either gunshot or blood impact classes. So, the steps in this experiment was first, a method was proposed to improve the determination of the blood source location. An introduction of plot-based method to locate the blood source was proposed, and then a probabilistic approach to identify the horizontal projection of the blood stain was proposed. Okay, so the experiment, there were 94 blood spatter patterns generated in a controlled environment. It was either the gunshot back spatter or the blunt impact spatter. And there were also 10 additional patterns there were also 10 additional patterns specifically used to test the influence of muzzle gases on the classification. So basically, they used the muzzle gases to test the accuracy. So the methods and terminology. So standard deviation was used, and also mean and standard deviation was used in order to classify the blood stains and the blood stain patterns, and then they also used skewness, to measure the distribution of the blood stains. So, in Table 1A, is basically is given the description of the 94 blood spatter, excluding the muzzle gases. So the 94 blood spatter patterns, they were used consistently throughout the whole experiment. And then also it shows the distance between the blood spatter and the vertical target surface where the stains were collected at. It's basically the BT distance. So the BT distance is the distance between um, the target and the blood stain where it originated at. Also in table 1B is basically the name of all the patterns including the muzzle gases. So that in table 1A it doesn't include the muzzle gases, but in table 1B it includes the muzzle gases. But they have a letter in front which basically represents like rifle or handgun, and it also says that the volume was 2.5 or 10 enclosed in the foam cavity. So the experimental setup to actually do the project was the gunshot back spatters, right? So in 1A, it shows the gunshot back spatters. So it has the BT distance on it, the target surface, the blood drops from the cavity dripping down on it, and then the blood source. Also in in the setup 1B, it has the it has the blunt impact. So the blunt impact is slightly different from the gunshot setup. The blood source is either shot or hit to generate either the gunshot wound. So it's shot with the gunshot wound, and then the cardstock is hit to create the blunt impact. And so the blood will drop from a blood source and then travel through the air before it reaches the target surface, and then the target surface in this instance will be the cardstock. So basically they're shooting at the through the blood source, which had anticoagulants. I'm not sure if I said that right. Anticoagulants in the blood to make sure it gave off the appearance of real blood, and it was shot or hit, and then the blood would travel through the air before it hit the target surface. So that was the basis of the experiment. So BT is one of the most important parameters in this experiment that was used. The BT distance will affect the spatter patterns as the number of stains of the pattern becomes smaller with increasing BT. So with the more the BT is increased, the smaller the target, the smaller the blood spatter will be. And also the table will describe how the BT is affected with the gunshots. So they also use box plots in order to explain the blood spatter patterns and the BT distance. So this is extremely important because you can see the difference between the rifle, the handgun, the cylinder, and the hockey. The different colors will help you understand how there were different distances. So it was 30, 60, and 120 centimeters. Also, another box plot will explain the mean diameter of the blood stains, right? So it's explaining every little part of this experiment to better understand how the blood stains from the gun or the blood stains from the direct blunt impact will affect the project as a whole. So the box plots determine the diameter of both the blunt impact and the gunshot wounds. The dotted rectangles on there will represent the gunshot, and yeah. And then also we have another box plot that will determine it's a spatter against the BT distance. So it shows the different patterns with the BT distance, and it also has a picture of the actual blood spatter. So it's showing you the axis of the blood spatter, so you can see how big, how wide it is from a blunt force or a gunshot. BT distance is extremely important in this project simply because it's showing you everything you need to know about it. The graphs go through and walk you through each blood stain, the blood stain radius of both. It shows you different graphs to understand the distance, and it shows how far and how close the effectiveness of it. So the further you get, the less effective it is. Um, the accuracy is best made at 30 to 60, and then as you get higher, the more centimeters you add, the less effective it is. Um, so this project was basically it had a lot of graphs, right? So the graphs simply explain how each diameter or the radius of the blood spatter is more effective. The BT distance is the key focus in this project, though. The quicker you get onto the BT distance, the quicker you understand the basis of the project. So in their project, after they had did all the tests with the BT distance and the plotting and formulating all the methods and conducting like standard deviation, the model shows that the classification accuracy is 100%, when the BT distance is 30 to 60, and when the BT distance is 100 centimeters, they're classified as impact patterns, and it corresponds to the accuracy of 0. So as I said earlier, the further you get out, the more centimeters you add to your distance, the less effective it is to get an accurate reading on the blood spatter analysis. And the key point of this experiment, the key takeaway, was to understand the methods that can be adapted or adopted as a classification of spatter. So basically, this project was to set a basis, a SOP of how to conduct the experiment and find out the different ways blood spatter can be affected, and how the distances and the radiuses of blood spatter, blunt or gunshot wounds, can affect the crossing reconstruction as a whole. The results of this experiment shows the importance of classification accuracy of the distance. So, as I said, I'm sorry, the BT distance is the most important factor between the blood source and the target surface. The mean diameter was collected, the standard deviation diameter was collected, and the ratio of large blood stains are important because it can either classify gunshot wounds or impact spatter. And then all these features are important because it simply explains how blood spatter pattern analysis is can make or break the reconstruction process. So if you can't understand the BT distance, this project will be hard. This will be harder to understand in the field and in real life. So the key takeaway is understanding that as blood stain pattern analysis is effective when done right. The BT distance and all the graphs and the charts and plotting is important because it helps understand how far away the gunshot wounds or impact blood stain patterns are can be effective, can be accurately recorded. So overall, blood spatter analysis and the effects of different blunt force or gunshot wounds is important, extremely important. It can help the case. It can help understand what happened, and the BT distance is the overall important of this. And that concludes my presentation. Have a good day.